This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Let's go to the McClarty Daniel hotline and talk with Pig Trail Nation's Mike Irwin. We always appreciate his time on Mondays, especially after practice today. Mike, how are you?
You know, I'm so glad. We'll be glad when August camp is over and classes start. These 9 o'clock practices are throwing my biorhythms off. They used to talk in the old days about 2-a-days had a cumulative effect. It would start wearing you down. These 9 o'clock workouts are messing me up because I'm used to working like 1 in the afternoon or 2 till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and suddenly it all changes and flips around, and I can't sleep. And so I get like 3 hours of sleep, and I'm back up doing it the next day, and I'm walking around, you know, like, what's going on here? So,
yeah, could you imagine if they kept the 6:40 practices like the first one? Would have been a whole different thing.
The first one was like, what am I doing out here?
Well, anything stand out to you at practice today? We'll get into Morgan Turner and the tight ends later, but in the window that you were able to view, anything stand out to you?
Yeah, we've heard that there's going to at least be some elements of the air raid offense to what Dan Enos does, and we've seen some drills or some sessions where they do that, and they had a good one today outdoors with full pads and some hitting going on. And if you've ever watched the air raid, you know what Leach was doing with that. He would essentially take a pass and turn it into a run. Your quarterback takes the snap, looks one side or the other, throws to a flanker or maybe a receiver that's back in the backfield, and there's maybe a pause of a second or two while all these blockers out there on the edge, you know, tight ends, other receivers start picking off people, and you're trying to pick a spot to shoot through, and if you make it, you can break a long run. So they were doing that today. And I would say the first 5 or 6 reps, those corners and safeties out there and linebackers were just knocking the fool out of whoever caught the ball. They were going nowhere. I'm thinking, well, this looks good for the defense, but not for the offense. But you've got these backs, you know, like Rocket and Dominique Johnson, who are fast and quick, and it didn't take long. Rocket saw a little crease, and boom, he went through it, and he was gone. And then Dominique did it. So it's been fun to watch the back and take of a drill, or take, you know, the back and forth of a drill like that, where one side looks bad and then the other side looks better a little bit later. I just think there's been good give and take, that scrimmage. You know, people have been complaining because all we could report about that first week was secondary having problems with this and that, and then all of a sudden it flips to, well, the offensive line can't block. And that was based on what Sam Pittman said right after the scrimmage was over, but they didn't look at the numbers, which suggested that even though the offense started slow, they looked pretty good later on. So I just think there's good give and take so far.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how Coach Enos gets these players in space, Mike, when you're talking about that air raid offense, because you have to be okay with getting a 1-yard pass completion, like you said, because it's just an extension of the run play. But then you get these guys out in space, and you can't arm tackle our running backs.
No, and you can see that, and they're just so much quicker than you. When you see a guy that weighs 240, it's not just top speed. It's what you talked about earlier, Matt. It's the ability to change directions and accelerate very quickly. Dominic can do that really well. Rocket can do that well. And then you've got a guy like A.J. Green, who's not as big, but he's very quick like that. So I think that's going to be interesting when they do that. But also, you know, what I find myself, even though I'm complaining about how the fans react to this, I didn't see that scrimmage, so I'm not sure what's up with the pass blocking. But because you've got new guys out there and you don't have everybody returning like you did last year, you just have questions about what's the O-line going to look like, what's going on with the quarterbacks, you know. And then there were people that noticed, several people commented on Jefferson's demeanor in that press conference after the scrimmage, and he looked mad to me. But if you think about it, he had to go in there and sit down. They've got this little room behind where the press conference is, but you can hear what's going on in there. So he's got to go back in there and listen to Sam Pittman talk about some of the problems that the offense had, and I think he came out there a little bit mad. And he talked about we got to get better this week. So it's a motivational thing.
Having a true freshman at left tackle might make a senior quarterback mad sometimes, and I mean that's one of the things I took away from just reading about the scrimmage. If Devin Manuel's not starting, he's not playing. Andrew Chambly got a lot of snaps at that position, and I know that's one area where Sam was concerned about. He wants Chambly to win the number 2 job at left tackle so that you don't move Bo Limmer over there if there's an injury to Manuel. And you already have an injury to Manuel. He didn't practice again today. So that is something that's a little bit alarming, just because I don't want a true freshman at left tackle unless my former, my head coach, who's a great offensive line coach, signs off on it. And I'm not sure if he's ready to sign off on that.
Exactly. And again, the problem is these are things that we don't see. We just hear about it. And you'd always feel a little bit better talking about it if you'd actually witnessed it. But I don't know how serious it was. Again, I looked at the numbers that they gave us, and it wasn't like, 323 yards on the ground and 283 yards through the air. It wasn't that tight. They just listed big plays. But there were enough big plays in that scrimmage that I knew it wasn't just a total screw-up by the offense. There was some give and take there. So that's where we are right now. But we'll see in scrimmage. I think it's interesting that this thing that went on today that I was talking about, it wasn't like full tackling to the ground, but they were knocking the fool out of each other. This is more physical than we've seen in the past. I can tell you that, especially compared to what went on last year.
Who amongst the players in the secondary are the big hitters right now? If they were laying it out in front of you and you had a chance to watch, who stood out in that secondary then?
I like Snacks. The guy they call Snacks. I mean, he'll lay it on you. And I guess they're talking about putting him, more to nickelback position. He's been some at corner, but I think they're trying to figure out, okay, if we got 5 really good guys we could put back there, we don't want him at cornerback unless we have to put him there. But he's the one that I've watched that will really come up and lay a lick on somebody. And again, when you watch some of this video that the university puts out that's after we leave, you can see some really good plays being made by that secondary. It's not like they're all just standing there going, whoop, I got left in the dust on that play. I mean, it happens. It will happen. But I've seen some really good plays out there, and then apparently some of the things that they're putting up on their website now show that there's a lot of give and take there between the passing game and the secondary.
Mike, any freshmen that are standing out that the coaches are talking about that you think could be getting some playing time this year?
Yeah, it was interesting. Today was the tight ends day, so Morgan Turner is there. And it was Ty Washington that started talking about Luke Haas. And, I mean, he said he's the best tight end he's ever seen. He thinks he's going to be a starter as a true freshman. And some of these other guys, Francis Sherman, he's a tight end transfer from Louisville. He said, I've never seen a tight end that good before. So I don't know. We've heard a lot of talk about the camaraderie on this team and how they each pull for each other. So I don't know if they're exaggerating or what, but they were just acting like Luke Haas was like the best thing that's ever come along. So, again, you want to see him in an actual game and see what he can do.
I maybe worry isn't the right word. I just look at a real lack of experience at that position. Your defensive line, you got a ton of experience there. Running back, quarterback, secondary, there's a lot of experience. I look at tight end as maybe the least experienced group of all of them. But that doesn't mean they're not talented. It doesn't mean they can't. But I think you're right. I think of Shamar Easter, and I know Easter showed up after spring ball, so he's got a little more to catch up with. I've heard about Haas ever since they signed him and during spring. You look at Gums. I mean, these are guys that are in their first, or in Gums' case, third year of college football because he redshirted one season. It's just there's a lot of opportunity for somebody to cement himself. And it isn't just one or two, because you know how it's like, hey, we expect what this offense will do. And when I hear you talk about air raid, I know like an air raid under Mike Leach, you didn't really have tight ends much, but your running backs caught a lot of passes. But I could imagine in some sort of version of it under Dan Enos, your tight ends are really involved in those sort of packages too. They caught an average Mike, of like 30 passes a year at that position the last 3 years. It's going to be much, much more than that this season. I wouldn't ask you to put a number on where you expect the wide receivers to catch, but, man, they're going to catch more than 30. At least that's my expectation, a lot more.
Yeah, you'd think so. Now, complicating all of this along the lines of what you're talking about, Morgan Turner, the new tight ends coach, pointed out that this is not a typical 12 personnel situation. It's highly technical. There's a lot of X's and O's involved. So, again, you got a lot of newcomers. And Francis, for instance, Francis Sherman said when he first got here and saw what he was going to be asked to do, he thought, man, I went to the wrong place because it's so technical. But they all ended up talking about how Turner is a perfect coach for that situation because he does not yell and scream. It's all teaching type stuff. And they all said they've gotten better. And Francis Sherman said, I used to just zone out when you have a position group meeting that lasts 30 minutes and it's talking X's and O's. And he said, now I'm fine with it. So, again, everybody can talk about this. We're still going to have to see it. But I understand what you're talking about when you talk about an important position like that and not a lot of experience.
So what's Coach Turner like? I mean, I'll go back and I'll watch the press conference when we're done with halftime today, but I haven't heard from him yet. What's he like, and what did he want to talk about?
Well, I would say he's pretty much the way they described him in terms of, not being a real emotional guy. He just sits and answers your questions, and it really is like talking to maybe if you took a classroom teacher and just started asking them about the class that they teach. That's what it seemed like. He seemed really happy. Here's the thing that he ended up saying. And I get the impression this guy does not blow smoke, but he said he was very nervous going into that scrimmage because of all the youth and all the teaching that had to be done and all the things that they had to do correctly, again, along the lines of what I'm talking about with all the X's and O's. And he said when it was over, I was really, really happy with what they did. So he put a stamp of approval on the first big test for these guys, and now there's another one on Saturday.
Is there a timetable when the left tackle's coming back? I mean, I guess he's the one, we had the one receiver that got hurt that's out for the year,
right.
and we're just waiting on, is it Limmer? We're waiting on him to come back?
It's backs.
Backs is they didn't talk about backs. I mean, you're not going to get a position coach to talk about injuries. Pittman pretty much is adamant about that. So on a lot of these injuries, we're not going to know unless the school put out a release or Pittman has another press conference. I promise you. Now, everybody was circulating. It was pretty much approved by the athletic department to go ahead and talk about Bakke and how he is out for the year. But all these other injuries, there's been no comment on from anybody, and the only comment you're going to get is if Sam Pittman says it.
Mike, I should have texted you this earlier, but I want to get a reaction about this if you read it. If you read Hunter Yurichek's editorial in Saturday's Democrat Gazette, it was titled Save College Sports, and advocating, as I think we'll see, a lot of athletic directors, certainly out of the Southeastern Conference and probably some of the others, doing the same thing, writing editorials that go in a statewide paper. Do college sports need saving? That would be another question that you ask about this.
Oh, absolutely, and they've got to step it up. There's so many issues. There's NIL. There's the transfer portal. There's this whole business of conference deconstruction. That's one of the most alarming recent developments is what happened to the Pac-12. That is not good. And I may have mentioned it last week. This is all coming from the network people. And somebody reacted to what I'd said and said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. These athletic directors, when they make these decisions, they don't let network people vote. No. A guy with ESPN or ABC or CBS, they don't vote whether or not to take two teams out of a conference and into another conference. But they're on the phone with these athletic directors, and they're on the phone with these conference commissioners, and they're saying, if you want us to give you an $800 million, $1 billion new TV package over X number of years, we're not just going to do that. You have to give us what we want. And what we want is we don't want games that don't draw big ratings. And that's alarming, guys, because you can see where this is headed down the road. What happens if the day comes when a network says to the SEC, we don't want Vanderbilt in games anymore. We don't want Mississippi State in games anymore. And then you start seeing these conferences. What happens if down the road the Big Ten and the SEC combine and they kick out a bunch of teams when they do it? I hope that never happens. But these athletic directors and the conference commissioners are going to have to stand up to these people sooner or later and say, there's only so much you're going to push us into doing. We're not going to just turn college football into pro football. And that's where it's headed. And it's like they're not paying attention, because NFL is suffering right now because of that. A lot of people have turned back to the college game because they like it better. Well, if you take what people don't like about the NFL and you introduce it into the college game, what have you just done? It's stupid. It makes no sense.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.